Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Okay, welcome to the podcast, Jenny.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you for being with us. So, today we're talking about play, and often we call work and play, right? We have this binary maybe in our thinking that is it work or play? All work and no play. And I wanted to have Jenny on the podcast to talk to us today about play at work because she is something of an expert when it comes to play and work. So, Jenny, will you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a coach and facilitator, I guess, first and foremost. I call myself a playful coach and facilitator because I like to use playful and creative approaches in my work. I have a background in theatre and music. So spent a long time wanting to be an actor and then realised that didn't seem very sensible. So I stopped that part of my life for quite a long time. But as part of that, ended up getting into music and working in, the grassroots music industry, I'd say, primarily UK jazz. Met a lot of amazing musicians, met one in particular called Abram Wilson, who was a jazz musician from New Orleans. And long story short, we ended up kind of working together for about 3 years. I sort of took over his whole career, apart from the creative bit, which was interesting. And maybe we will touch on that a bit later. But I didn't feel confident enough to be creative in my own sort of endeavors and pursuits. So I facilitated him in being creative. So I did all of the stuff like in the background, managing his career, booking his gigs. And we did that for like 3 years, more or less. And then he passed away very suddenly from cancer. And I set up a grassroots music organization in his name called the Abram Wilson Charity, which I grew for 11 years. And I suppose that was a creative act in itself, building that. And for quite a while, it did feel like a creative process for me and also a place for me to put all my grief and all my love for Abram. I didn't really know what to do with all of that. But as time went on, it just became more and more draining as I became more and more CEO-like. And just ended up because it was a small organization, I had to be really good at a lot of things. And a lot of those things were really draining and took a lot of my energy and didn't really fill me up. And towards the end, I really started to feel like it was a bit of a chain around my neck, which I think a lot of people can probably relate to in terms of their experiences of work. It can feel really draining, especially if you're doing things that maybe, who said it? It was there's a guy who wrote a book where he talks about your zone of genius, being in your zone of genius. And I just wasn't in my zone of genius a lot. I was doing like things like bookkeeping and having to think about policies and procedures, and just wasn't really my thing. My thing was definitely being creative, building relationships, coming up with ideas, developing projects, working with artists. So I left just over a year ago. So it was 11 years of growing that organization, handed it on to somebody else. They're doing amazingly well with it, and started to build a freelance business for myself as a playful facilitator and coach. I'd say now I work with ambitious, purpose-driven creatives and entrepreneurs, because those are the two areas that I know a lot about. And I tend to work with people who've already achieved a lot and are ready to take their career or business to the next level. So I use creative techniques in my coaching to help people achieve their career or business goals without burning out, and building the right support network so that they can excel in what they do and get clear on their priorities so that they can plan for a long-lasting career or business. And then the other thing that I do is I work as a facilitator. So I work with teams who want to perform well under pressure. My creativity, my experience of working with creatives and being a creative person and playfully engaging teams to build trust and strengthen their connections so that they can feel more motivated, be more productive, and work more effectively together, especially under pressure, which I think, we're all feeling these days. There's a lot of pressure going around.
Thank you for sharing your introduction. I was really interested to hear what you said about having the confidence to be creative, and that maybe in your earlier life, in your earlier career, you maybe didn't have the confidence to be creative, perhaps in the way that you do now. So has something changed for you there?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was a kid, like most kids are really creative, right? I wasn't unusual in that sense. And I wrote a children's book about this actually called Becoming Brave. So it was about me and my late husband, Abram. And we were both really creative kids, right? Like I loved to make up stories. I loved to perform in front of other people. And I loved moving. I loved playing games, just kind of, I loved being visual, using painting, drawing, writing, anything that was creative, I was all over it. My late husband, Abram, he grew up in New Orleans, which is a very musical city, the birthplace of jazz, some would say. And so he was surrounded by music from like day dot. And he loved music. He loved jazz so much. And he started learning to play the drums. And then his mum was like, no, I have 6 children. You are not playing the drums in this house. So she taught him to play the trumpet. She kind of taught him how to make those initial sounds out of the trumpet, and that became his instrument. So that was from 11. And I think the difference between Abram and I is that he went to a performing arts school in New Orleans called the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. So he was doing his normal academic studies like English, maths, science, etc. And then that was half of the day. And then the other half of the day, he was really focused on jazz and playing jazz music. And he did that all the way up through till 18. And I'd say I also had a really creative education, maybe not as intensely creative as his, but it was very creative. And then when I went to university, I continued that creativity and I continued acting. And I really wanted to go down that route. And I think that's kind of where our paths definitely went in different directions, because I was like, I just don't really see how I can do this. I applied to drama school in my last year of university, and that was pretty brutal just because I was trying to get my dissertation finished, and then I was traveling down to London and I was doing these auditions. And I got through to final stages of a couple of conservatoires, and they were like, you're not quite ready, come back next year. And I was like, yeah, well, I could go and take that gap year I never took. So I went off to Madrid, and I lived in Madrid for 2.5 years. And I was really creative there. I joined a couple of theatre companies, and I developed shows that we took into schools, and worked with an actor, a group of performers and creatives and musicians. But my partner in crime was an actor, and we developed this show that we would tour around schools. That was one of the things that I did. But I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I don't want to go to drama school anymore. The idea of like having to go back, re-audition, and then be in another institution and not be able to earn money, or, a decent amount of money, and then get to the end of it and then just be sort of at the mercy of agents and waiting for somebody to give you a call, because that was kind of what it was like back then. I mean, this was like 20 years ago. Social media didn't exist. Your ability to get yourself out there and known on your own isn't necessarily the same as it is now. So I basically went, I should probably do something sensible. I should probably move to London where my friends are and my boyfriend is, and I should probably just do something sensible. And instead of going and continue with all the creative things that I love doing as a hobby, because, I'll be in London and there's so much on offer there, I just put it in a box and went, well, I don't need that anymore. And I kind of went through this period where I was really scared to be creative, and I was worried about not being good enough or getting it wrong or looking like an idiot, which I think a lot of us feel, like when I think this is why the word play is so triggering. Sorry if that word makes you cringe, but but I think it genuinely does trigger stuff in people, and adults can have really like visceral reaction, especially when you talk about play in context of work, because it's vulnerable. It's a vulnerable place to be often, and you're kind of showing a side of yourself that maybe you don't want to. You're worried that will get judged in some way, so we don't do it. So I would say I've kind of gone on this 20-year journey to get myself to a place where I have re-explored my creativity over the last few years. I ended up accidentally writing a children's book and getting that published. I've done a lot of like public speaking over the years and standing up on stages and talking and telling my story. And actually what I've realized is the thing that I love doing the most is just being in a room and being playful and embodying that, or doing what we did the other day, which was that one-to-one creative coaching session where we got, you just got so many juicy bits out of that session. It was amazing.
And when you were talking about, you did creative stuff and that was just a natural expression of who you were as a kid. And then when you got this other job, it was like, right, I'm going to put that away now and I'll put that in a box now and I'll be very sensible. And I completely relate to what you were saying. And I think probably loads of the professionals that listen to this podcast, can also identify with that. Everybody loved drawing and painting when they were a kid. No one gave a shit how bad it was. They just did it and they loved it. And then we come to some kind of point for those of us who are professionals where we put all these childish things away and we put them in a box and then we get on with our very serious, very professional life. For many of us, the crossover between work and play has never met. When I was chatting to Jennie about this, she really made the case for creativity and play in all jobs, in all workplaces, not just the ones that you might imagine where creative is on the job title, but actually, like I was thinking of my old job in a law firm or working in the NHS. I want you to talk a bit to us, Jennie, about the case for play and creativity in all jobs, in all industries.
Oh my gosh, where to begin? Yeah, it's a big one. You just touched on something really interesting, which I call permission to be shit. So when you're in a playful state and you're in a safe space where you can be genuinely playful, what does that feel like? So if you're like in a room, so this is kind of one of my favorite ways to play. Bearing in mind that I come from a performative background. So I like being in a room with other people and I like playing with them. So I like being in a space where we're playing games and we're interacting with each other and we're connecting with each other. And those games could be, they're simple games like hug tag, right? It's a really, really simple game. It's something that you might have played it. You probably did play something similar to it as a child. I suppose the difference between playing tag or, British Bulldogs, I guess that was another game, is it's quite competitive, isn't it? You're kind of like in this state where you're being quite competitive and you're trying to get from one end to the other and not get caught. And that's the game. Whereas the games that I like to play kind of take the competition out of it, and it's about being in a play state. With the example of hug tag, what that means is you've got somebody who's it, and their job is to try and catch somebody, and then you're trying not to be it, and you're helping each other not be it by hugging each other, right? So that's how you can save somebody by hugging them. And if they're being hugged, then they can't be it. So that's kind of the premise of the game. So this is like, what has this got to do with work? Okay. Well, imagine a group of strangers are in a room, they don't know each other, or they feel a bit awkward with each other, and then within a few minutes, like they're hugging each other. So you're connecting with each other in a room very, very quickly, and you're in a safe environment. So it's like I can take a few risks here. I can I'm being connected. You're in a state of like presence. You're being mindful. There's a little bit of risk there. If you get caught, it doesn't matter. You have a go, try again. Suddenly you're it. And then you start playing with that. You're like, okay, what would it feel like if I actually enjoyed being it instead of trying to like get rid of it as quickly as possible? What does it feel like to embody being it and having that power and playing with the power, right? Not in a I'm in control kind of way, but in a, if I try and move towards people, they're going to run away. That's quite fun. I could play with that. So you're suddenly interacting with each other in a completely different way. It's not about being competitive. It's about being playful, and it's about having fun. And you've built this level of trust with each other and connection really, really quickly. So that's ultimately what I'm really interested in, is how play allows you to kind of be in your body, and very quickly all of this stuff starts to come out where you're able to connect with yourself. You're able to, I guess in our situation when we used the Lego series play technique for your coaching session, but we didn't use Lego, we used random objects. All this stuff starts to come out. Your subconscious starts to express itself through your hands. You start to put things together, and these random objects suddenly have meaning. Or you're playing a game and suddenly you're working with these people in the room that maybe you don't know that well, really well, and you're trusting each other and you're connecting with each other and you're playing with each other. So, and then you kind of compare that to what we're dealing with most days at work. We're sat in front of a laptop, aren't we? We're still. We're not moving. We're working from home. We're in a kind of two-dimensional environment. We're not engaging or connecting with people in a fun or playful way. It's, the meetings are run terribly. They're really boring. They're often quite pointless. The workload is excessive and often quite mind-numbing. And you're just like, okay, well, if we were to inject a bit of creativity and play into this situation, how would that change things? And I think that's what I'm interested in, because ultimately it helps you to feel more connected. It helps you to feel more engaged. It helps you to trust people quickly. It helps you to be creative and think innovatively, because you're in a grounded state. You're not in an anxiety state. You're not in a worried or stressed state. You're not in a state where you're feeling frustrated and angry. You're out of that state and you're down into a grounded state. And then that's where things can start to emerge, and interesting work starts to happen as a result of that.
Thinking of those things that you just said, who doesn't want that for their team? That they're able to take risks and they're connected and they're present and they're able to think in a different way and tap into their subconscious and have innovation. Everybody wants those things for people and for their teams and for their organizations and even just for themselves. And it sounds like play and creativity is a way in, almost an easy access point, actually, to those things.
Well, I mean, you said that yourself, didn't you? After we had done that session together, I guess just to perhaps give a little bit of context for people listening. So I used something called the Lego Serious Play methodology for a one-to-one session with Anna. But Anna didn't have any Lego, which is fine. She just gathered a collection of random objects that she was drawn to from around her. And I'd already designed the session beforehand. It was just a very mini session to review her year of work. And we did a few warm-up games, didn't we, with moving the objects around and just sort of playing with them and getting used to kind of attaching meaning to them. And then the question was a really simple one, which was what's gone well in your year, for work. And then you built something, and I think you spent probably about 3 minutes building it. So it's not necessarily the building bit that's the thing that takes the time. It's the bit afterwards, because your subconscious, it works really quickly, right? Because you're thinking with your hands. And I was like, don't overthink it. Just see where you want to put these objects and see how you want. So we called it a sculpture, didn't we? That's how we approached it. And then you very quickly created this sculpture. And then I was like, okay, well, tell me about it. And there was so much richness in that sculpture. It was amazing, like how much came out of that. I don't know if you want to share a bit about it at this point, but I'm always amazed. It's like magic, basically, watching this happen, because what you're doing is your subconscious has gone and it's kind of created something from within you that you haven't quite been able to articulate yet. And then your conscious mind sees it, and then it's able to use the objects or whatever it is that you've built and attach meaning to it. And so it's able to create metaphors and storytelling, and all this stuff comes out, and you gain so much clarity in such a short space of time. And I think that's what you're referring to as a way in. It's like, it's a way into all this richness that's within us. And I think that's the thing, like, because of the way that we work now, we're not connected to our bodies very much. We're quite static a lot of the time, and it's quite mind-numbing, like literally often it's quite mind-numbing. And so this is a way to get reconnected with our bodies and to allow other parts of ourselves to express themselves in whatever way it might be. So I find Lego Serious Play is a really nice, easy, gentle way into play. But then what I love to do is move, like that's my thing. And we were joking before we started recording about me needing to stay still so that the sound was good and I didn't knock my mic. But I was like, I think that's going to be impossible because I move so much even when I'm sat still talking. So I think just picking up on that thing of a way in was...
Yeah, absolutely. So we did our serious play session in, what was it, last week, I think? Obviously, Jennie does loads of work with groups and she's already been talking about that, but she also does work with individuals. And I wanted to kind of get the real experience of how this feels and what it's like. So I'm gathering all these things from around the home. But as I was embarking on the session, I was thinking, okay, well, I trust Jennie and I know that she's good at what she does. And I know that she's cool. So like, this is okay. But at the same time, I was looking at this collection of random objects and thinking, what the hell am I actually what am I going to do with this? And I was like, just trust the process, Anna. I'm sure it will be fine. So even I was like a little bit I was slightly apprehensive. So we did these few little introduction things like Jenny mentioned, and we made like some sculptures and put some stuff together really, really fast, which actually got my thinking brain that was like, well, I don't know how this is going to go. It totally like got that out of the way because I just didn't have the time. And then we did this bit that Jenny said that we looked at my year through using these random objects that I'd picked up. And again, my brain was like, right, how are you going to do this? And I just thought, no, let my hands will just things will happen if I just start. And so I was picking up all these objects and I was arranging them on the tray. And as I was getting into it, I could see myself doing it. And I was like, oh, like something's happening. And so I was busy doing all of this arrangement and blah, 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 blah. And then I was done. And I produced this beautiful, I'm going to call it a beautiful sculpture. And then Jenny was like, okay, talk me through it. And I really got talking through my year in business and my kind of working year. And like Jenny said, it held a lot of richness and it gave me insight that I kind of been aware of it. Obviously, some part of me was aware of it, but the conscious part of me wasn't. And it was quite, is mind blowing the right word? Maybe. It like gave me goosebumps. And it was very revealing. You can't see me, but I'm opening my eyes really wide to show you. It was very revealing to see what came out during that few minutes even.
I asked if you wanted extra time and you didn't really. I mean, it was more or less 3 minutes of building. But when you started talking about it, it was like you'd planned it, which is impossible. There's no way you could have planned what you built in that time. There was no time to do that. On a conscious level anyway. So it was amazing listening to you talk. It just all seamlessly kind of came together. It all made sense. All these epiphanies that you were having, this clarity that you were getting from your year, and things that I think had been perhaps you've been kind of ruminating over suddenly became really obvious and really clear for you in terms of what you were going to take into next year. It's such a privilege to be able to run sessions like that. And like I said, it was a mini one. Like often the sessions, the proper kind of sessions I do can go up to 2 hours or could potentially be longer than that. But yeah, they go really deep. And I might just ask, like I'll sort of work with a client beforehand and we'll sort of talk about what it is that they want to use the session for. And then I will go away and plan it for them. And I might come up with 3 questions for the session that they will build around. We might only get to 2 in a 2-hour period because, like I say, it's what comes out after the build. And then I might ask another follow-up question or ask you to add something and then see where it goes. So I kind of plan it, but then it's also, you kind of need a bit of well, you just don't know what's going to happen. And it's interesting you bringing that up in terms of how you were feeling about the session. It's like, well, I know Jenny and I trust her and I'm sure this is going to be fine. But for people who don't know me, it probably sounds completely bonkers. And they're like, what is this woman talking about? I mean, fortunately, I'm not alone. There are other people who are, have been working in play for much longer than I have professionally. So it's like something, it's a process that I'm learning in terms of trying to kind of get the language right so that it makes sense to people in terms of the benefits of it. But yeah, I mean, to me, like you say, it's like, who doesn't want to have a high performing team? Who doesn't want to have a team that can perform well under pressure? Who doesn't want to have a team that can work well together and feel connected? And for me, from my background and the way that I like to work, I'm like, it's so obvious. It's so obvious what you need to do. And yet it's so far removed from our day-to-day working lives because there isn't permission really to take risks. There isn't permission to fail. There isn't permission to enjoy yourself. There isn't permission to have fun. You try and say fun in a facilitation environment when you're running a session. Okay, guys, we're going to have some fun now. Everyone's like, oh, fuck's sake. All that word.
Like, oh my God, what?
Yeah. Like literally, I did a session not that long ago for a group of, it was a directorate of 20. So they were marketing people, they were fundraisers, and they were policy people. And, they only have to come into the office one day a week, and it doesn't have to be the same day. So they don't see each other. And this is why play is so important, because it allows you to connect with each other. Like, being in connection with each other is so important. Like, I suppose I'll go back to this person who I'm going to tell you about, so remind me. But what I really want to say about play, and this is what we were talking about the other day, is that it is literally why we exist as kind of at the top of the food chain, right? So the most intelligent species play. And we are apparently, I mean, it depends on who you're talking to, but apparently we are the most intelligent, or one of the most intelligent species. So play is an evolutionary trait that has helped us to survive because it allows us to connect with each other. If you look at kids in war-torn countries, if you look at the kids in Palestine, for example, what are they doing? They're playing. Even though their entire country has gone to shit, those kids are still finding ways to play. Why is that? Because it's really important to our survival. It's ingrained in us. We need it. And yet our working environment is telling us that we can't do it. It's saying that play is the opposite of work, when in fact depression is the opposite of play.
Mm.
So if you say, so think about bears. The most intelligent bear is not the one that catches the salmon really well. The most intelligent bear is the one that plays the most. So if you want to have a really good working environment, you need to inject a bit more play into it. It needs to be more creative. It needs to be more fun. And you also need to inject a bit more play into your life, right? Which could just be hobbies. Find some hobbies, find some things. I mean, you were mentioning the other day that you picked up the guitar again.
Yeah.
Just have a play, see what you like. You might, this is the thing, right? There's so much advice out there now via social media, etc. And it's like, well, if you just do this every day, you're going to feel great. No, it depends on who you are,
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, to get into a more embodied state for this podcast, I was dancing around to Shaka Khan for 5
Nice.
minutes. Because I love that song, Just Be Better. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me really happy. And that's playing. That was just me, like, free flowing, not caring, crazy living room dancing, getting into a state of play, getting into an embodied state, being in a good mindset for this call. It can be something as silly as that, and as easy as that. Like, you don't need to spend lots of money on it, for example. Like, you can just do a bit of crazy living room dancing and see how that works out for you. But yeah, going back to that session that I ran, so I set up, like, I had Lego on the table. It wasn't a Lego serious play session, but I brought some Lego anyway for people to play with. And whilst we were delivering the session, and I had, like, pens and paper and pastels and, things that people could doodle with. And so we had that, we had some music. And then as people were arriving, I was like, okay, well, I'm just inviting you to take a seat. There's some paper on the table if you want to have a bit of a doodle whilst you're chatting to your friend or your work colleague and having a coffee, feel free, kind of thing. But I started off by saying, and this goes back to language, right? I started off by saying, yes, I'm just inviting you to just create a sort of visual representation of you and like how you're feeling today. There's one woman just looked at me and went, and I was just like, it's okay. Like, it can be shit. Like, look, here's one I made earlier, kind of thing. And I showed her something that I'd done before people had started arriving that was genuinely shit. And I was like, it was just a doodle. Like, that's all you have to do. Just have a little bit of a doodle if you want to. Permission to be shit. She was like, oh, okay. Anyway, not long after that, she was furiously scribbling away on this piece of paper and ended up creating the most beautiful piece of art. She created these, like, 3D spheres that were all kind of shaded in different colors. And it was these beautiful, brightly colored bubbles, basically. And it was so stunning. And I was like, oh my God, that's so interesting. But I think, like, she was really worried about being shit, and she was really worried about exposing herself in front of her colleagues. And so I think, yes, play is great, but it also has to be handled with great care. And the environment has to be created in a way where people feel safe to gradually show a part of themselves that they might not ordinarily show, like a silly part of themselves, or a part of themselves where they might get it a little bit wrong. It's okay when you're playing, it's fine. You get it wrong, it's fine. Have another go. No big deal.
Yeah. And that's why I called this episode The Confidence to Play, because as a human, as a species, we don't need that. We do it right from the beginning, right from the word go. But maybe when we've gone through life and we've kind of lost that somewhere along the line, or we've put it in a box, actually, we do then kind of need the confidence or take that little risk, hopefully in an environment where it's safe for us to actually play. And I just thought about the links with the work that I do. So I'm helping people to feel more confident at work. And it's the same stuff that you're talking about there. So it's like being able to actually take that mask off and be like, this is who I am and this is what I've got. And permission, as you say, to be shit.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to give yourself that permission to be shit, especially when there's something new. Everyone's like, no, no, I'm a professional. I have to keep this mask. I have to look perfect all the time. And it's like, well, if that's how it's gonna be, then good luck with building confidence because it's the wrong way round. Like,
Mhm.
you're never gonna be confident in that way. And the connection bit as well, like, you're like, "Oh, it connects you with other people, and it's a connection with yourself." And the same for confidence. When you take the mask off and you're who you are and you're giving it a go and you give yourself a bit of permission, you can then connect properly to you and to the other people who you're actually trying to connect with,
Mhm.
and you can be present. The thing you were talking about, like, you're present when you're playing. Well, unless you can quiet that mental noise so you can actually be present doing what you're trying to do, you're not gonna be confident, you're not gonna bring the best of what you can to what you're doing. So there's so many nice crossovers.
Yeah, I love that. The best of yourself in what you're doing. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about play is that when you're playing, whatever it might be, playing with others, or, you might be just doodling on your own or crazy living room dancing, it is it is the best part of yourself that's coming out. I mean, I know that that sort of language has been overused. I just want to be my most authentic self. I just want to be my best self, etc. But it's like genuinely when you are playing, and you're playing well with others, or, if you choose to do it on your own. I mean, I doodle and crazy living room dance on my own all the time. And it's like a really lovely, lovely part of myself gets to be expressed. And I think we miss that in each other when we're at work. We miss those parts of ourselves. Like I think about my partner, for example, he's a corporate lawyer and he has to mask all the time at work, and so he's a very kind of like sensible person at work and he's very good at what he does. And he's also very worried because corporate law is a quite a cutthroat, ruthless environment to be in a lot of the time. And so you've kind of got this constant fear of like, am I good enough, am I good enough, am I going to be okay? And I get to see this other part of him that's really playful, that's really funny, that makes me laugh, that's silly. And it's not safe for him to be that at work a lot of the time, most of the time, I would say. And I think we can't change the entire system, right? Often these things are systemic. You can control your own sort of play, for want of a better expression. And if you're in charge of a team, you can make that team more playful. You can make that team more creative. You can try and make sure that that team has a bit more fun together. You can be responsible for that world because that's where you will get the best out of people when people start to feel trust, trust in themselves, trust in each other, connection. We're hardwired to feel connected. And when we don't feel connected, we feel disengaged. And when we're not engaged, we're not motivated. And when we're not motivated, we're not productive. And yet everyone keeps banging on about productivity and how important it is. It's like, duh, it's not rocket science.
And it's strangely the stuff that we seemed to know as children. And then somewhere along the line,
I know, if you've
when we
got
got to
kids,
those
like
adults,
if you've
we
got
forgot.
if you've got kids, play with your kids. Play
Yeah.
with your kids, muck about with your kids. They're great for just getting yourself back into a grounded state. And often we don't have time. We're just like, oh, here's the iPad, here's the phone. I'm
Mm,
busy. I need to check my emails or, whatever. And
mm.
it's like spend some time off your devices with your kids and play with your kids. And if you don't have your kids, which I don't, I'm like, borrow them. Borrow your friends' kids. I do it all the time.
Yeah, I found they're only too happy to lend you their kids for an
Yeah.
hour. So I feel like you're saying the more serious, quote unquote, your job is, the more important play becomes.
Yeah. Definitely. Because it's like, how are you going to do the serious work if you are in a state of stress and anxiety? You know, this is what I was saying before. So, I mean, look, we don't have time to get into nervous system regulation, but this is what it's about at the end of the day, right? So, play is about being in a grounded state. It's about being mindful and present. It's about getting out of a fight flight response, which a lot of us are in most of the time. So that's where you're feeling, you know, flight response is like anxious, worried, you know, up at night, can't sleep. Fight response is angry, frustrated, impatient, snappy. If you're in that state for too long, you are on a one-way ticket to collapsing, to burnout, to depression, to hopelessness. So it's like, this is also about looking after ourselves. And if your job is serious and stressful, like you need space to play in whatever shape that takes for you, because we're all different and we all play differently.
Yeah, and I feel like they're the moments when you through play have, like you use that word, grounded and present. That's when my good ideas suddenly pop into my mind and I'm like, "Oh, I never thought about that before." Or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, surprise, surprise, here we are, something that your unconscious knew the whole time. But me trying to be serious and make serious decisions just didn't have access to.
Yeah. It's like you're not going to come up with your best ideas by sitting in front of your laptop going, oh, I just need to think really hard about good ideas. It's like you're going to come up with your good ideas when you're not doing that. Einstein would famously, when he couldn't figure out a problem, he'd go off and play the violin. And that's when he worked out. He'd go off and play, literally. He would go off and play. And that's where and that would allow his brain to figure it out. It's like, stop doing your work and go and do something else that is playful. It doesn't, you know, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be that playful. Sometimes you could just go have a shower and have a great idea in the shower because you've stopped doing the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I could talk to you for another 3 hours about this.
See, I told you. I was like, half an hour? Are you joking?
I wonder if this is touching any nerves for anybody who's listening, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
wonder if it feels a little bit challenging, and I kind of hope that it does, because I think that if it does, we may be onto something with you. And I had a boss who, a great boss called Laura, and she'd got these huge pieces of paper and all of these different pens and bags of Percy Pigs, which she always used to bring along. And I was like, "What are we doing?" And she was like, "Oh, we're just going to go away in this other area, and we're going to use all these things to kind of." You know, we were thinking about building strategy or getting people engaged with strategy. And I was like, I must have looked at her, gone out. And she looked at me and she said, "Anna, work should be fun." And I looked at her like she was a total nutter. I was like, "Sorry, I'm a lawyer. Can you just come again?" "What do you mean work should be fun, you crazy woman?" And it turns out she was right.
Why not?
Exactly.
Like, why not? We have to do it for 12 hours a day. I mean, that's basically what it's coming down to now, isn't it? No one's got a 9 to 5 job anymore, or not many people have a 9 to 5 job. So it takes up a lot of our time and energy. So it's like, well, can we not? I mean, look, I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to make replying to emails fun, but there are other things that could be made fun. Meetings could be made more enjoyable, more interactive, more playful, more creative. You know, there is, presentation. I mean, I was listening to but one of the kind of leading experts, researchers in play is a guy called Dr. Stuart Brown, who's based in the States. And I was listening to an interview with him the other day. And the guy who was interviewing him is also a kind of play teacher, I suppose. He teaches at Stanford. He also makes toys for a living. He was basically, I can't remember what it is that he's teaching, but he was saying that all the presentations that his students have to do on whatever research project they're working on at the time, they have to present it as a skit, like a little sketch, a little play, a little comedy sketch, a little something, because he's like, the worst sketch, or the worst skit, whatever you want to call it, is always going to be better than the best PowerPoint presentation.
So true.
Yeah, he's right.
So true. Thank you, Jenny.
You're very welcome. I very much enjoyed talking about this. Oh, yeah. So I was just going to say on my website, there's a free stuff page, and there's like a little free workshop of the session we did, Anna, the one on reviewing your year. So you can kind of go off and do that on your own. So yeah, my website's just jenniecashman.com if anyone's intrigued. Or if you're interested in experiencing it for reals, just get in touch. Just book in a little 15-minute chat with me about it.
And I would highly recommend, Jenny, because I've experienced it and it was good. And I will leave those links in the show notes so you can just scroll through and click and find that link to Jenny's free stuff. If you're thinking about reviewing the year, then I loved doing it via that play method that Jenny introduced me to. So I would recommend go and do it. And if you're doing it with a team, even if it's at the end of the financial year, it's so important to do it so that you can do your planning and looking forward. And this is like a really easy, somebody's already thought about how you do it. So
Yeah, and
hand
that's
it over
just
to
like
Jenny and let her do it.
one thing that we can do. But I mean, like I did a 2-hour session with someone the other day on their team and, how to build a better team. I'm doing one tomorrow on how to have a more effective week because they're building an online education business and they keep finding themselves getting sucked into random tasks like spending 5 hours on a YouTube thumbnail. So, it can be used for anything really. And for teams, it's great because it sort of flatlines the structure. And so it gives everyone an equal voice, which is really nice when you're, I don't know, thinking about something like strategy, which is what Lego Serious Play was originally created for. But I mean, people use it for all sorts now.
Okay, cool. And actually now my head is just buzzing with a million ideas now about the way in which the work that I do when I'm thinking about confidence with people, I can make that into play and games.
Yeah, exactly.
We already have one, which is like a bingo. And we have the low confidence cycle and the high confidence cycle that I take people through. But I made like a bingo card, or I had somebody make a bingo card for me. So it was like, can I identify this behavior? Am I self-critical? Am I this? And it's like bingo. They can like fill in the bingo cards.
Ah,
And you know what? I still have never had the confidence to do that live with a group, but I definitely will do that. So look out in 2025
oh
for
my
more
gosh, I want to hear
fun
how
and
that
games
goes.
about
That sounds
confidence.
really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it. I think, why not? Especially when you run your own business, like how can you be more creative and playful with it?
Definitely something to think about. All right, Jenny, thank you for being with us. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed that and you've thought about how you could bring play into your day, into your work day, into your team's day, into your organization or your department's day. And if you want to get in touch with Jenny, you can contact her. I will leave the link in the show notes. And we will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident, confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident at work.